Greetings, everybody. We're just going to give folks a minute to join in. It's good to have you here. And we are recording, just so you know.
Why are you cheating on Luke? Nice. Why are you dressed like a cheap hooker? Yeah, next time I want to borrow my full dad.
Looks like Anne and Donna were able to get on this week. I heard a couple of people had some difficulty getting in last week, so it's great to see you. All right. Well, I think, oopsies. I think we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone to Wildlife Wednesday. We are super excited to have Matt with us tonight. And hi Matt, great to have you. Before we too much further, I'm just first going to recognize, in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, and the Yaxi-Nakota nations. And Alberta is home to Métis Nation Region 3 as well. And welcome to all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. I'm joined in the background by Anne Berner and Marissa Goff, and I'm so grateful for the two who are leading our new education group and have done such a wonderful job of coordinating Wildlife Wednesdays. So thank you so much to Anne and Marissa. And yeah, so welcome, Matt. So Matt Wallace is here with us. He graduated from the U of C with a Bachelor of Science in Geography. And his studies included the Technical University at Berlin, Master of Science Urban Ecosystem Sciences program. And yeah, so Matt, your work in Berlin focused on urban soils, biodiversity, and sustainable transportation. That's so interesting. Coming back from Berlin, Matt then completed his thesis about the vegetation composition and, pardon me, coming back from Berlin. I'll have to remember to turn off the dinging. After returning from Berlin, Matt completed his thesis about the vegetation composition and structure of St. Patrick's Island in Calgary's East Village. In 2019, Matt organized his first City Nature Challenge in Calgary to promote ecological literacy while documenting Calgary's local biodiversity. And the event has been running strong since then in Calgary, thanks to Matt's efforts. Some of Matt's passions also include gardening, biking, skateboarding, photography, live music, and brainstorming collaborative and alternative ideas, which is how we met when Matt became one of our founding expert team members for CMSRT and was a big part of our starting. And so we've missed you, Matt. It's really great to see you. And so I'm very, very pleased to have you here. So what we're going to do, so everybody knows, Matt's going to provide us with his presentation. He'll give some pauses at a couple of times for messages, or for, not messages, for any questions that you might have. And so, yeah, if you have any questions, definitely let Matt know. And at the end, we'll have some time to talk as well. So don't be afraid to let us know if you've got any questions. And Matt, over to you. Hopefully that you're able to share your screen okay there.
Okay, thanks so much, Kathleen. Just load up the presentation here. So I recognize a few people in the audience tonight, and I'll try not to bore you with things I know that you've likely attended a couple presentations before. Tonight, I'm going to try and get you guys into the app iNaturalist. I'll talk a little bit why I'm so passionate about this app and how it's being used in research and science to understand both urban environments and biodiversity on a global scale. So we'll dive right in here. As Kathleen said, we first met when the CMSRT was first forming. I believe that was in what, 2018, end of 2018, moving to 2019. My background, as Kathleen mentioned, is kind of in urban ecology and biogeography. And from that, I've kind of just adopted a self title as a freelance urban ecologist. And I say that because I take on a lot of different projects ranging from art to citizen science coordination, working with conservation groups in their promotional materials, and just trying to help educate people about urban biodiversity and what's going on. As Kathleen also mentioned, I'm the City Nature Challenge Calgary organizer. I'm one of about 500 people that's been organizing the event throughout the world. So we meet on about a monthly basis to discuss the event, all of the structure for it, how to kind of set up our iNaturalist projects and so on. And we've been doing that for 3 years now in Calgary. So 2019, 2020, and 2021. And we've recently just started planning our 2022 City Nature Challenge. And I'm really excited about this year because it continues to grow exponentially. So we're looking at around 700 cities participating around the world, which is up from only about the 100 when I first started planning in 2018. I'm also a board member for Nature Calgary. You may have read some material that I put out in the newsletter, as well as a board member for the Weaselhead Glenmore Park Preservation Society. So outside of all of the citizen science, if you ever have any questions about biodiversity, conservation, or even our urban parks here in Calgary, please feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'm happy to discuss with you various issues and topics. So my interest in kind of urban biodiversity spawns from the idea of cities being built up environments. These are generally places that are designed for people and our activities. However, of course, we have lots and lots of biodiversity that exists. And when I say biodiversity, I'm primarily speaking towards the diversity or variety of life beyond or outside of people that exist alongside us in terms of urban biodiversity. As I said, I am a large advocate for the platform of iNaturalist. It's one of the many citizen science apps that's available for people to contribute their observations to. This is my girlfriend, Melody, here, taking a photo on a recent trip we made to Ontario of a monarch butterfly. And I do have her permission. She joked about how she wasn't allowed to be in the presentation today, but she is. So what is iNaturalist? Essentially, it's a social network that allows people to share their enthusiasm for biodiversity while contributing information that can help one another learn. So it can help researchers and scientists, but also just amateurs working towards learning to identify things, students that are trying to improve their skills, whether it be in biogeography, ecology, biology, all those types of things. And all those people are participating within the app. The primary goal of the app when it was first created is simply to connect people to nature. So the idea of we're living in a bit of a digital age, how can we kind of merge the topics of using photography, digital information, while still appreciating the natural world. As a secondary goal, it's to generate this scientifically valuable data through the photographs, the audio clips, and even the stories or anecdotal reports that people supply. And on the right, this is kind of a map of what the observations around the world look like. The app was originally created by the California Academy of Sciences with the assistance of National Geographic in kind of the San Francisco Bay Area. And it's become just a global phenomenon. So These numbers are from today, and there's about 84 million observations surrounding the globe that work out to about 345,000 species, give or take, because these ones are only of wild organisms, but people also document their garden plants and house plants and all of that kind of thing. So there are many more species contained within these observations. And since promoting the City Nature Challenge in Calgary, Calgary has become a bit of a hotspot for kind of iNaturalist use within Western Canada and North America as a whole. So you can kind of see where we're located there. This map is kind of a density hotspot map. So depending on the number of thousands of observations made within a single square here, the darker the red, the more observations there are. And you can kind of see Calgary and Southern Alberta here have a lot going on. I just want to show you what it looks like in terms of Alberta on a closer scale. So on the left, we have the total number of iNaturalist records for Alberta, currently sitting at just under 325,000 observations. About a third of those, 125,000, were added just since January 1st, 2021. On the right, these are the observations here from just this year. And what you can see right off the bat is that the hotspots, the same as the global map, occur in urban areas. And this is because obviously these apps depend on people using them. And often people use them, live in cities or urban areas. So Calgary is kind of the number one hotspot within Alberta, with a second following in Edmonton. Lethbridge has quite a few, and all of these other smaller towns and cities are jumping on board as well. The way that iNaturalist works is that people like you or I will go out and we'll take photos, or we'll make audio recordings of flora and fauna. That's everything from fungi, microorganisms, lichens, birds, mammals, plants, everything in between. They document them and they share them to iNaturalist. And the key components of this is kind of a verifiable record, which is the photograph or the audio recording, a location, and the date. Once they upload those into iNaturalist, there's this feature called the Identitron, which assesses the image based on the location, the date, time, and will provide a user with suggestions about what they saw. It's later confirmed by the community of iNaturalist users. These people are referred to identifiers, and they're made up of experts and amateurs. And once it's confirmed, the data is shared with national and global biodiversity data centers. So in Canada, that would be NatureServe Canada. And on a global scale, it's the Global Biodiversity Information Facility. And I have these kind of recurring circles going back to show that they all relate to one another, because once the observation is confirmed by the identifiers, it helps to retrain the Identitron in terms of assessing imagery or audio recordings, which also helps to allow people to understand what they are documenting in real time. And as later on, when I go to the how-to, I'll kind of demonstrate how that works. I should also say in Canada, there is an iNaturalist network. It's iNaturalist.ca compared to the iNaturalist.org. So although I'll just be saying iNaturalist in this presentation, I'll always be referring to iNaturalist.ca. The reason for that being that when we share observations within Canada or by a Canadian user that is associated with iNaturalist.ca, the information is fast-tracked into these databases, such as NatureServe Canada, that can manage the data a bit quicker than if it were coming from the iNaturalist.org website. So a lot of people say, why are people using iNaturalist? You know, there's lots of apps. The one thing that sets iNaturalist aside from all others is that it's that identitron. It's the ability for the app to identify it in real time and make suggestions about what it is somebody may have seen. That community that reinforces that only kind of encourages this. So often people simply just want to know, what is that I saw? They take a photo of a bird or a plant and they share it to iNaturalist. Perhaps it doesn't even have a name, or it's a basic identification such as plants. And the community will reinforce or identify that and reinforce their enthusiasm for the app. It really spans the spectrum of what people are trying to document. This is a photo from the Weaselhead Moth event that we hosted this year. This is its second year running. But also, you know, during the City Nature Challenge, we're documenting the first flowers. We're finding rare species within urban environments, as well as in areas where things just haven't really been assessed in other times. And people do this simply to explore and to have fun. They use it as an excuse to get outside, a lot of recreation and exercise. Of course, with its foundations in photography, a lot of people are using cameras, whether it be in their phone or digital cameras, and they love to share them. So why not a better place like this? And as I said, with its core is to connect with nature and kind of to make discoveries, whether that be on a scientific scale or even a personal scale. I'll also be using the term citizen science, also known as community science. They're interchangeable within this field. And that essentially means people wanting to share with a greater scientific community to provide the data where otherwise a scientist may not be able to get to, or in terms of cost, both time and dollars. And then on the research kind of side of things, there are over 3,000 papers now that have sourced iNaturalist data. They do that through the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, or GBIF, I'll just say from now on. Lots of topical research includes, you know, rare species, new species. Particularly, there's a lot on invasive species right now. Lots in terms of biogeography and range expansion of species, and phenology, which would be the seasonality of when things are not only observed by people, but when they occur in nature. And then more recently, in the past, say 5 years, kind of public engagement in social sciences has become a huge part of community science, to get people outside, to have them participate in various ways, as well as to understand how people engage with nature as a whole. In terms of more local scale things, I'll kind of provide a few examples for that as we move forward here. But it can be everything from, you know, environmental justice about, say, where parks are located in a city. Is there social equity within that? Bio blitzes, like events such as the City Nature Challenge. And, you know, agencies, say it's a park agency or a conservation agency that may want to have assistance from the public in documenting lands that they're responsible for. So in this presentation, I'm going to bring up a whole whack of examples, and I want to bring this one up. This was a pretty amazing experience for myself. In 2011, I did a kind of a cross-continental backpacking trip where I started in Chile and I worked my way up to Nicaragua. And I did have a camera at that time, but it was just a film camera. It wasn't anything like amazing, but it, you know, I took lots of photos on that trip, and I kept a journal at the time, so I knew kind of the locations that I was at particular times. And on that trip, I hiked to Machu Picchu and I saw this bug on the railroad tracks, and I took a photo of it. And I only uploaded it last year. This was right before the City Nature Challenge. And a few months later, I got an email from an entomologist in Peru saying that this was the first record of this insect, which is kind of a subspecies of a stick bug, observed in the wild. And even to date, there's only 11 observations now added to iNaturalist, which are all the records in the wild of this species. So it just kind of, what I want to emphasize with this is that, you might not think anything of that bug you saw or that bird you saw, but I can tell you that there's a lot of value in just taking a photo of something, whether it be today or say 20 years ago on an old backpacking trip, that can still retain a lot of value for research and conservation. And by the way, this is where all of the observations are, kind of right around Machu Picchu in Aguascalientes, where, of course, there are some people backpacking and is a premier destination there. So another project that I've kind of been involved with, of course, in the city, you may see this field pennycress growing in disturbed soils. It's also pretty common on roadsides and more rural areas. I was contacted by a researcher in the United States asking me to go back and actually collect seeds regarding this plant to look at genetic variations relating to climate change on that. That was all that conversation happened through iNaturalist. And then a project that happened kind of 2018 and 2020 that I find really fascinating, also demonstrating how valuable the importance of photography can be in terms of science, was this mountain goat molt project. And these were people from around the world sharing trail camera images of mountain goats, as well as photographs that they had seen on their trip. There was a guide on how to assess the amount of molting happening with these and at what times of the year, which led to research on how this species was coping with climate change. So a really incredible project that kind of just, as I said, emphasizes the importance of photography as an instrument or a tool in regards to citizen science and observations. So as I said, phenology is very important with this. We want to learn how, like when species are kind of occurring within nature. An example of that could be kind of the cicada brood that was all over the news within the United States. Every 16 to 17 years, they may emerge. And those records can be very important. One that I like to share more locally is the morning cloak butterfly, where we can see that it can actually occur as an adult in any month of the year when we have our Chinooks within Calgary. But from essentially February until late June, we will see the adults. And at that time, we start to see the larvae that emerge of the eggs laid by those adults. And then there's a second hatching of the adults, kind of beginning at the end of July, happening through October. These butterflies overwinter as adults. And as I said, at any month of the year, you could see one in Calgary. But these graphs are all derived from iNaturalist data, kind of filtered down to Calgary. And later on, I'll demonstrate kind of how you can do that yourself to learn more about when you may expect species to occur in your area. So another local project that's going on right now is this Be a Citizen Science project that's being organized by the University of Calgary, the biology department there. What they're looking at is how pollinators and particularly bees, which plants they're visiting within Calgary. The idea is to kind of develop a guide later on where we can understand maybe what types of plants we should be putting into native plant gardens, and in terms of what types of plants we should reintroduce during restoration that will most benefit pollinators. And this is an ongoing project right now. So if you took any photos of insects visiting flowers this year, I would highly encourage you to upload them, where they will be automatically included into the iNaturalist project. So yesterday I met with Kathleen and Anne and Marissa to just ensure that everything was flowing smoothly with the presentation. And we started to talk about the Eastern gray squirrel. And I thought I would just put this into the presentation today because it is a really fascinating story. As you may have heard or even noticed, in Calgary, we have an abundance of Eastern gray squirrels that occur in essentially throughout the entire urban environment. They are considered to be urbanophiles that thrive in developed areas where there's an abundance of food. There are plenty of places to nest. They're also considered to be an invasive species because they outcompete our native tree squirrels and threaten native birds by predation of eggs. So within Calgary, we have about 10% of all of the observations within Canada, and they are native to the Carolinian forest that's found in southern Ontario and throughout the United States. Just pull that up here. So on the right side, that's considered their native range. And you can see, just based on this density hotspot, that Calgary is a bit of an island in terms of Eastern gray squirrels. And there are thousands here. And it's thought that the majority of these squirrels are actually derived from a small population that was introduced to the Calgary Zoo through a trade with the Toronto Zoo. These were later released at St. Patrick's Island. So that kind of marks an origin of where this species began in Calgary. And now using apps such as iNaturalist, we can really document kind of the range expansion, the distribution of them. And I personally believe that we could actually map out small familial populations based on kind of their fur colors. So for example, at Prince's Island Park downtown, there's a small population of Eastern gray squirrels there that are very unique. They are black with a bright red tail. In other areas, they are gray, some are brown, and some are black. And I think that using this kind of citizen science and photographic documentation, that we could really understand a lot more about these squirrels living in our urban environment. And here's one I saw the other day that was acting pretty cute hanging out in this apple tree. Another kind of project that I've helped to or assisted with in Calgary is creating projects for our local parks. And as I said, I work with the Weaselhead Glenmore Park Preservation Society, where we have a project for the areas that we steward. As of today, we have over 7,900 observations and just under 1,000 species, which is really incredible for this area. It could be, for example, one of the most biodiverse parks within the city of Calgary. And that includes also the reservoir, where we see a lot of pretty remarkable vagrants and migratory birds. One thing I just want to point out too is that, it doesn't take a lot of people to contribute a lot of observations. So almost being at 8,000 observations, it's only from 376 people. So a small collective of people contributing to a platform like this can really contribute a lot of information that can help us with management plans and ensuring that this type of habitat is protected within the city. And just how that's kind of broken down as well. About 2/3 of the observations have achieved this research grade, which means that the iNaturalist community has confirmed the species, suggesting that it would be shared with NatureServe Canada and GBIF. iNaturalist is a hotspot for, the Weaselhead and the reservoir are hotspots for birding in Calgary. So about 1/3 of the observations that we have for this area are birds, followed by another 1/3 of plants. And the rest are everything in between, from fungi to even fish and aquatic plants and those types of things. So on kind of the larger scale here, within the municipality of Calgary, we just surpassed 90,000 observations. And I have to say this is a huge achievement and a benchmark for us, because when I first began promoting the City Nature Challenge, there was only about 5,500 observations within the municipality of Calgary. So simply in 3 years, we've added about 85,000 observations. And these are all of wild organisms. If we included some of the garden plants and house pets and even zoo animals at times, it's closer to 99,000 observations. And I think that this is probably the most advanced record of biodiversity that we have for Calgary. So we're looking at, within the city limits now, about 2,800 species, still with many left to be identified. And I think that this is a profound statement kind of by the public to say, we love our nature in Calgary. We have fantastic natural areas, fantastic parks, and we want to show the world that. So it's not just about, gathering data and collecting things. This really demonstrates that a lot of people are appreciating these spaces for the life that exists there beyond people. And as I said, it doesn't take all that many people. Like, this is still a lot of 3,500 observers within Calgary. Very happy to see that. And that's from a lot of programs such as the University of Calgary, the City of Calgary, the City Nature Challenge, Nature Calgary, and Weaselhead, all kind of promoting and banding together on iNaturalist. And I'll kind of touch on a few of the questions after this map, but one of the important things to realize is that most of the observations occurring within the city of Calgary are still happening within our parks. So that's great in terms of us being able to understand the types of biodiversity that our parks can host. However, if you look around the parks here, these are our communities and commercial areas, and even the ring road on the far left of the screen here. We really don't have that many observations for these areas. And I think it's the next step is really to kind of infiltrate the dense urban settings to understand what is existing there and what we can learn from that to progress on this type of research and just symbiotic relationships that we have with these organisms. So those observations make up a lot of really cool things, everything from rare plants, as I said, kind of species relationships. So what types of pollinators are using what types of plants, kind of interesting mammals, such as these badgers seen, or that I took a photo of a couple of years ago in downtown Calgary. And we can start to ask questions a little bit more about urban habitats and suitability for biodiversity. How does our urban environment affect kind of local climate change or urban climates and climate change on a larger scale? Excuse me. How has our urban environment how is our urban environment affecting kind of the seasonality or phenology of organisms? And also, what can we learn about our relationship with nature as a community? So I'll take this moment to try and answer a couple questions that are in the chat, if there are any. You're welcome to unmute yourself too if you have questions regarding this type of research, or if there's anything specific to those before we dive into kind of how to make observations.
I don't see any questions in the chat, but my cousin Anne is actually on the line from Toronto, and she actually captured a really interesting photograph the other day of I guess it would be an eastern gray squirrel, but with the white tip on the end of its tail, which I thought would be interesting to upload and then learn why something like that would happen. And do you get observations back like that, Matt, when you find something like a regular squirrel, but an interesting coloration where might draw interest?
Well, there are so many things that are being uploaded to iNaturalist on a daily basis. As I said, like it's 125,000 within Alberta this year alone,
Yeah, that's
that
huge.
it's hard to kind of dive into these things unless you're a specialist within some field.
Hmm.
Now, an example of that may be a herpetologist looking at amphibians within, let's say, the province of Alberta. And if you upload, say, a photo of a frog at your local wetland or something, or an audio recording of its calls, that could be of highly valuable information to them. And they may be able to kind of pick up on those small variances within its features. So in terms of the squirrels, that once again, like it's gonna, I haven't dove 100% into this research of Calgary's urban squirrel population. However, it's an opportunity for someone if they would like to. And all it takes is that kind of question saying, is that interesting? Is that unique? And what more is there to this story for someone to kind of pursue those questions? So
Right.
I would say if you saw something that you thought was interesting, that's worth sharing with the world.
Well, thank you. And there's a question here. Let's see, another one just came in, which bumped the other one. Let's see here. I believe it was if I'm uploading to eBird. Let me make this larger here. If I use eBird, would I also upload the same information about a bird I've seen into iNaturalist, or does that duplicate the science information? That's a great question. Thanks, Carla.
So the short answer, as kind of always with biological data, is yes and no. Generally, so let's say I'm a researcher with, say, Birds Canada, and I want to look at species within, say, Calgary. Now, what I would do is I would likely source my data from GBIF, and I would probably filter that down to eBird. The reason I would do that as, say, like a scientist is because eBird has set kind of criteria, which is known as effort. So that would be the distance you traveled and the time that you spent outside. It also has a lot of information regarding the number of individuals that you saw on that count. Now, there are other uses that iNaturalist can also kind of be used for. So once again, I could be a researcher looking at Birds Canada, looking at birds within Calgary, going to GBIF, but actually sourcing only the iNaturalist data. I could also do that for museum curated data or all of the above. So there are ways that it is duplicated because it's two records that are being shared on a global platform. However, the opportunities arise where you may need, say, more photographs than, say, checklists or counts of these birds. And it's different types of scientific approaches that lead to those methods. So I would say there's no harm in sharing your photos to both eBird and iNaturalist. If you have a preference, you're welcome to use one or the other. I still regularly use eBird, but more often I share my photographs to iNaturalist.
Right.
So
Okay. Sorry, go
let's
ahead.
see another question here. Is it possible for casual users like most of us to produce distribution graphs from in-data, incidence of some bird species in Calgary or Airdrie by month? And yes, you can. I will dive into kind of how you can filter out data and how you can retrieve that information. So that's a couple slides down here, but another question, do researchers have an option of asking more questions about a certain observation they're interested in? Answer to that is yes. Often, if you see something really remarkable, somebody will contact you directly to find out more, perhaps asking for a detailed explanation. assuming that maybe you didn't share enough information, or in some cases, it's even artists that may want to use the photograph that you've taken, and they'll contact you asking for permission.
Wow.
So can you tell us more about how to track a certain area for iNaturalist reports? I can kind of share that through the observation process. And Simone, I would be happy to talk to you about creating a project if you'd like to collect some larger data, but probably outside of this presentation. Are there any competitor products to iNaturalist? Are there any collaboration efforts to merge data sets to support citizen science data sets? Yes, very much so. There are lots of apps. I would say that eBird is probably the most widely used citizen science app in the world. However, there may be more users of iNaturalist at this time globally. The eBird is highly centric to kind of North America. It's growing rapidly around the world with over 1 billion checklists submitted now, which is incredible. But we also have local apps such as NatureLinks, which was created by the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute. And often I work closely with them. We don't really consider ourselves to be competitors so much as both attempting to provide a service to people to document things that may have scientific value. There are some larger kind of more recent developments with data aggregation software where you can say pull in information from multiple apps and visualize them. So you could say, look at a map of Alberta and you could click on a pin that would have eBird, iNaturalist, NatureLinks, EdMaps, all those types of things. But as I said, most of these are kind of all the data at the end of the day ends up at kind of GBIF. So the collaborative efforts are there, and it's up to kind of researchers to find the data that they require out of that platform.
Is there a way that when you're entering, or could they maybe add this in, where if you're entering into iNaturalist, where you could click off and say, also enter to BirdMapper, also enter to eBird, so that if somebody did pull reports from multiple places, there'd eventually be a way to decide about eliminating duplicated data, or would that be just too much maybe?
It does exist, but it's not common practice at this time.
Right.
I hope that one day that it will, there will be more relationships created between various apps, but at this time they are somewhat isolated from one another. But I think it's inevitable that this will become common practice at some time.
Makes sense. I don't see any other questions there other than from Simone that thanking you.
Okay, so maybe one thing I'll just do quick is not so much a poll, but maybe you can use like a reaction, like a thumbs up or something, if you've uploaded observations to iNaturalist before. Because I'm just wondering how much time I should maybe spend on showing how to upload observations, or if we should just kind of skim through this and touch on some of the main points.
Yeah, and if you look at probably at the bottom of your screen, there's reactions. If you put your hand up, it'll stay up for a moment. We can take a look. So if you're experienced with this, then put your hand up. I know we definitely have a few beginners. Yeah, there's only a couple of people with their hands up.
Okay, so maybe half the field or so. And
yeah, thank you.
Okay, so if you go to iNaturalist.ca, this is kind of the landing page that you'll find yourself on. And what you want to do is you can sign up using Facebook or a Google email. Just go to the top right corner. You can click log in and sign up there. I won't walk you through that. I feel like it's pretty straightforward. But I want to show you a couple things here. So when you first land on iNaturalist, if you haven't made any observations or you haven't subscribed to any certain taxa, then you'll be on your dashboard here, which is where you get all kind of your news feed. So I subscribe to beavers and also follow a couple interesting iNaturalist users and stuff within Calgary and around the world for that matter. So when they upload something, I might see it here. And I can also kind of click on my own content to see what's going on there. One of the most important things I would just like to say though, is when you've signed up and you're into iNaturalist, go up to your profile in the top right corner there. You can enter some information about yourself, provide a photo. You can define your username if you want to change it and which email will kind of contact you with. That's in case there's updates or something and iNaturalist is reaching out to you directly. But if you go down to account here in the top right corner, there's the iNaturalist network affiliation. And the best thing you can do if you're a Canadian citizen would be to use iNaturalist.ca. As I said, that kind of gives Canadian researchers and data managers the first go at what you share, as well as those data centers heavily depend on not only kind of global taxonomic changes, but more regional ones for species endemic to Canada. So if you are on iNaturalist.ca, everything will be up to date and you'll have nothing to worry about after that. So kind of surfing the iNaturalist platform, if you go up to the top, there's the Explore tab, and this is where you can conduct all of your searches, as well as filter out specific data, as Andrew asked earlier, and I'll show you kind of how to download that at some point here too. So this is in Canada. There's been about 2 million observations around the country, from what I understand, in 2021, which is just phenomenal. So we're on Canada right now, and I just typed that in, and there's a small little pop-up tab. Just select the place at that time, and we can zoom into a place like Alberta, and we can explore these places. I know Anne said that she'll be going on a diving trip in the near future, and this is like an amazing way for you to kind of, say, research a place on the other side of the world to learn about what you might see in a certain place and time. So kind of moving forward on that, we can also refine that more to, say, Calgary. You can type in a local address here as well. And you can see that this brings up kind of a placeholder text box. So it's just a square, 20 by, I guess it's 20 by 15 kilometers, this box. But we can refine that even more by using this Places of Interest tab. And in there, you'll see the community curated places. So I've added a lot of them within Calgary, but also throughout the province for, say, towns like Airdrie or the City of Calgary municipality. And you can kind of search for those under the Places of Interest. So we'll just click on that. And now you can see it's the official border for the Calgary municipality defining these results. And I'll kind of explain a bit later on what these dots are outside of the boundaries and why they're included here. So there's multiple ways to view the data. As a geographer, I love working with a map, but as kind of a naturalist, I like to, see what we're looking at. So you can either click on any of these pins and you can pull up the observation. You can move over to this grid, or you can also go to list. And here you can kind of organize it by, say, name, the date observed, the place, the date added. That's a simple filter of kind of when things came through and what you might be seeing. But I think this is what Andrew might be interested in here, and this would be the filters. So what you can do here is you can check off any of these boxes here. For example, if you wanted to see wild organisms that are verifiable, or only research grade, or perhaps only observations that have not received a community ID, we can check those off. Maybe you only want to hear hear observations that have audio recordings. You can search for your own observations or others by username. You can check out a specific project like the Weaselhead Glenmore Park bioinventory. And you can also refine it by categories and by the photo licensing. So if you say wanted to use a photo on a website or something, you can refine it to a licensing agreement that allows you to share somebody else's photo with credit, or sometimes if there is a compensation expected. So depending on the licensing, you can kind of do that. After you've kind of selected these filters, just hit the update search. And Andrew, this is kind of what you want. Like if you're interested in pulling raw data out of iNaturalist, there's a download tab at the bottom right corner here. And you can check off all of the attributes per observation that you would like. That could be location, date, and at that point you can create your own data tables or visualizations. I'll also kind of show you how those are integrated into iNaturalist in a bit here. So
I'm just going to ask about, Simone just mentioned, are you able to see the screen, Simone, the share screen? Or is there a technical issue? Not able to see it? If somebody else can comment, just because I can see iNaturalist. Are you able to, is anybody else having difficulty with seeing the iNaturalist screen? Oh, we've got 3 Anns on. The other Ann can see it. All good. I can see it. Okay. And so, Simone, I'm not too sure. Try maybe there's a view button. You can maybe toggle with the view button and then see if it'll work. And then Susan also. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. And Matt, in a little bit, if you have, while you're showing us how to filter through your data, and we've got Susan with Alberta Bats on as well, and people with different specialties, be interesting to see an example of pulling out a certain species like that, or, well, I'm sure
I'll show you that
anything.
right now.
This is fascinating.
That's kind of the next step here. So I haven't refined it to a particular species, but I think a lot of people are surprised to hear that we do have native orchid species growing within the city. So just to kind of demonstrate that, I can type in just a general name of orchids. You can refine this down to a species name or a subspecies in both the kind of English or common name, plus also the Latin name. So if you really want to dive into something, you can totally do it. And simply by hitting that, you can, I haven't pulled them all up, but you can see in the background here, those are all the pins for orchids. So please never harvest wild orchids. It's definitely not appropriate and they will not survive. So, but I did want to demonstrate to you that they do exist within Calgary and there's lots of observations. So 246 observations of wild orchids within the city of Calgary.
So it's just as easy as putting them up in the windows at the top to do the quick search like that, hey? Susan's just asked, what's the rarest thing we have in the city, plant or animal?
Well, I suppose it depends on how you determine rare. But a couple of weeks ago, we had a yellow-crowned night heron here in the city, which was the second Alberta record ever. Generally, these are found in kind of the southern United States, typically kind of around the Florida region. And we had one at the Inglewood Bird Sanctuary, and there was, hundreds of people that went to see it. So that's probably the rarest critter that we've had in some time
Wow.
within the city. But we also have things like some very rare plants where the locations are just automatically obscured. And I'll kind of talk
Okay.
about that. And the reason for that is because they're so rare that they are considered to be red listed species that could be at persecution for people or by people.
Hmm.
So we have, I don't know, as I said, remarkable biodiversity within the city, and we never really know what we're going to get.
Wow.
The other part I wanted to share with you quick before kind of diving into how to make some observations would be to check out this community tab up here. And that's where you can kind of search for people and projects. So I'm on the projects page right now, and there's some featured ones, but there's a whole list of others. You can also start a project here, and this is where Simone would want to start for, say, creating a project and that kind of thing. And you can search for various keywords here. So we'll just type in like window strike Calgary. And a couple of years ago when I joined forces with Kathleen, I created a iNaturalist project for bird and bat window strikes here in Calgary. So these ones aren't automatically included. Someone like myself or another has to join the project and manually add them to this. But it does provide a pretty interesting kind of map regarding where most people are observing window strikes. And as I said, the reason that most people add their observations is because they say, wow, look at this beautiful bird. It just hit my window. What is it? So they post it here and they might write in the comments, this bird hit my window. And if I do a search for a keyword with a window and find it, then I might add it into this project. So there's some people that have been adding them kind of outside of Calgary as well, which I've recently included just to kind of see where this is all going and if there's anything we can learn. But there's quite a few in the downtown core where CMSRT does their surveys, but also it seems fairly common within this map. Can't make any conclusions, but they seem to occur around some of our largest natural areas. So if you do have an appreciation for birds, I encourage you to ensure they're safe within your yard, whether it be feral cats or off-leash cats, as well as marking your windows and turning off the lights.
Fully support all of those. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I'll just kind of finish off this slide here, and then I'll go back into some of these questions pretty quick. So observations can really be of anything living except people. We know that people are ubiquitous in the world, and it doesn't do anything for us to study for people interested in biodiversity to share observations of people. So please avoid doing that. However, you can upload everything from arachnids, squirrels, butterflies, amphibians, mammals, plants, and even evidence thereof. So that could be something like a cone or a leaf, perhaps a found feather, tracks in the mud or in the snow. Those are all widely accepted observations for iNaturalist. And as I said, there is the ability to make audio recordings too, where perhaps you can't see the subject, but you can hear it. And the amphibians and bat monitoring, as well as birds, are an easy opportunity for you to make observations and make a record of something that is underrepresented often and can provide a lot of insight into flora and fauna. The other thing I just want to say too is that, iNaturalist is intended for wild organisms. You can upload a photo of, say, a garden plant or a street tree, but there's kind of a mechanism where you can help to ensure that the data isn't compromised by marking it as captive or cultivated. I'll discuss that a little bit more in detail later on. So I'll just dive into a couple of these questions here. So Anne said, did you know we have fireflies in the Highland Valley? Who's seen a firefly recently? They're recorded on iNaturalist. So Anne, Simone did mention that to me and sent me some of the photos. I thought that was pretty amazing. One of the challenges with kind of documenting fireflies is that often we need almost a long exposure to map out the trail to identify what species it is. So although it might be present within Calgary, we can't determine what species it is without a sample or a larger photo or kind of a long shutter photo to mark out that the track of itself. It is important though, if you're able to document it in some way, to share it to iNaturalist, because a simple thing of having that record, it could be the first in several decades of fireflies being within the city. So highly encourage you to share those types of things. Another question here about, is there any concern that publicly sharing location data on rare species may put more stress on populations? In general, I would say no. There are some exceptions though, and there are ways kind of around that so that you can help ensure that a species is protected, or an individual for that matter. One way is, for example, you don't have to upload that photo immediately. So there was a big craze last year that you may have heard of in the Weaselhead Park, but a rare owl that appeared in the city. And it was shared both to eBird and to iNaturalist. And it's hard to determine if the organism was highly stressed based on people sharing the observation, or if it was the actions of people wanting to, say, document or capture a photo that would be shared for, say, social media. Whenever there's a rare or, say, very intriguing species or just organism that appears, there is usually a buzz around it, and the yellow-crowned night heron was exactly that. So what I would suggest is that, perhaps you just hold off on sharing that record. You don't need to post these things immediately. You can obscure the locality of these organisms within iNaturalist. To some extent, that is the same with eBird. You can share it to, say, a hotspot without defining its exact location. But I do feel that there's almost more value in making those records available to the public, as well as agencies that may look to them to protect these habitats. So there are, as I said, don't feel the need to share something immediately if you feel that the species is at risk. At the same time, based on kind of the COSWIC and IUCN red listed species, endangered species are automatically obscured. So if you share a photo of a grizzly bear, let's say in the city of, or in the town of Banff, it's going to be obscured even if you can see the street address within the photo. So researchers and scientists can access that data through NatureServe Canada and speaking with the managers of iNaturalist.ca, the Canadian Wildlife Federation. So you can submit photos of vacant nests. Photos of occupied nests are discouraged almost across all citizen science or community science platforms, just because that stress can inhibit the success of any organism. So I don't suggest to you to try and document nests that are occupied. But vacant nests are totally acceptable, and you're welcome to share those if you like. So I'll do a quick summary of how to kind of upload. Once you kind of go back to iNaturalist.ca, in the Explore tab or any of the tabs here at the top right corner, there's an upload button. You can click that. And then you come to this kind of drag and drop photos. So you can either just pull your photos right off the SD card or of a file you've saved and drop them right here. Under the more import options, let's say you have a Flickr account or a Facebook account, I think you can actually access Instagram images as well, perhaps. You can pull those photos in using the more import options button here. So just as a brief example, these are some observations that I made a few months ago. And as you can see, the timestamp from the photograph taken on my digital camera is associated with the image, and that's in the metadata. If you're doing this on an SLR camera, you may be able to acquire a GPS location using your camera and your phone, or perhaps a GPS recorder, and all that information will automatically come with this. If you have any tags or keywords associated with your photos, those will be automatically populated into the notes section there. But in this case, this is a manual kind of process. So I'll just show you how we kind of go through that. The first thing is that you want to assign a location to your observation. And for that, once you click on the location tab here, you can go up to search for location, and I'll just type in Weaselhead or Weaselhead Flats. I can click on one of these and it will bring me exactly to kind of the Google referenced landmark for that. So because this is in the parking lot where kind of the Weaselhead Glenmore Park Preservation Society is defined on Google, it's not the location where I saw the muskrat. You can clearly see that it's in the water. So what I'll do is I'll just zoom in on the map and I can just click there and bring the pin there. The center of the dot, or the center dot, is essentially where the organism was observed. And this field around it, or the accuracy that can be seen down here, is within this area. So I might not know that I was right under the bridge. Let's say I was on a dense path. However, I was within this area, and that's enough for kind of the location. The geoprivacy tab, if you're interested in kind of obscuring something, you can click here. There's open, which means that anybody can see the photographs and the exact location where I'm putting this pin. Obscured means that people can see the photos, but the location is obscured within a 20 by 20 kilometer grid. It's a random and unique point for each individual user. So they don't get to see the exact location. However, if a researcher wanted to use that data, it's a challenge for them sometimes to retrieve this. They have to contact you directly, and you have to kind of release the permissions for them to access that. That's usually not that big of an issue though, so don't feel ashamed if you want to obscure something. The private function under the geoprivacy, I don't recommend, because that means that nobody can see the observation or the location. So it's a personal record at best. And in terms of citizen science, it doesn't really achieve any of the goals stated earlier. So once you've kind of made your pin, you can hit update, and that's that. So you can also upload multiple photos. I always recommend trying to put the best photo first. And simply how you do that is there is a merge button at the top, or sorry, the combine. So you can just highlight those two using the control button and clicking, or holding shift and clicking the selected photos. You can also just drag them over top of one another, and that's what I'll do here. So as you can see now here, we have the one of two photos, and you can click through. And the reason you might do that is because one photo might have some important identifying features. Another may show another set of features. So how can we confirm that this is a house finch? Well, multiple photos may provide that context for the community to confirm. Another reason you might do this is simply because you want to try and demonstrate, say, the behavior of an organism. And what I've done is I've kind of just gone and populated these photos. I just want to show you this one on the left really quick. Sorry, maybe that's in a couple slides here, but the next step is to identify these yourself. So when you click on the species name, these are the kind of identitron suggestions that are made, and it's based on location, which is the scene nearby, and visually similar, which means that a minimum of 1,000 other photos have been confirmed, and it's been included within kind of the artificial intelligence to suggest this. So muskrat, pretty good guess by the computer. A beaver is a pretty good guess, and a mink is a pretty good guess. The one at the top is the most likely. And if you're not sure, you can always click kind of this, well, we're pretty sure, but not certain, and wait for the community. So I'll click on muskrat, and I'll do the same for house finch. And as I said, for this observation here, this is actually like a garden plant. So what I'll do is I'll go to the side and I'll click the captive cultivated button. And I don't say know what type of plant this is, so I'll put in a general taxonomic categorization for it, and I'll just put plants. And what that does is allows anyone who has an interest in plants to search and find this observation. If you don't have a name, it will just say unknown, and it's kind of hiding in the background of iNaturalist for the time being. And at the end, all you have to do is submit your observations, and you've completed those. So for myself, I go out, and what I do is I take hundreds of photos and I upload about 50 at a time. And I'll do that all within this online uploader before submitting them. I usually do them at about 50 at a time, just in case, for example, the photos are too large and the or like iNaturalist kind of backs up, and it saves a little bit of time from having to go back. So I'll just go into a couple of questions quick.
Yeah, lots of good questions coming in there.
Okay, so I'll talk about the City Nature Challenge at the very end of the presentation. And there's kind of one question here about, it's a good idea to obscure the location if it's a residence. A rarity may trigger a crowd to a private location, but sometimes it is just a residence, like let's say it's a wolf spider that is fairly ubiquitous, but it's inside my house and I share that. There is some subjectivity in terms of obscuring those locations. Some people prefer it to be obscured for their own privacy, and I totally understand that. So you can do that. But at the same time, as I said, if there is an observation of value to somebody, it takes some effort for them to contact you. So a residence can kind of protect private property and ensure your own privacy at the same time, but it kind of distorts the district, the map graphics in terms of where things may actually lie. for people that are kind of unaware of that. So I've been trying to use the mobile app, and all the observations I've made just say waiting to upload for forever, and I never get any community feedback. Okay. So I'll kind of go through the app really quick here, and I can discuss that a little bit. So tracking the absence of a species is somewhat challenging, because just because it hasn't been observed there doesn't mean it's not there. And on a larger scale, what we can say is we can look at, say, all of the GBIF data to determine if there's ever been a record for location. And that may, say, inspire a mission to go and check out this location, because perhaps the area is suitable for something, but it has not been recorded there. So the absence of something is a bit more challenging unless we have more data to associate with, say,
Can you
raising
enter
flocks.
a zero? Like if you say you go to search for bats in a certain area and you've checked 50 spots and you found nothing and you'd like to document that, can you put in a zero? Searched for and it's a zero? Guess not, hey?
No. You can't make an absent record of something.
Okay.
And it's the same for, say, eBird. You would never make a post and say there were this number of birds at this location. But
It's an interesting question though, isn't it? Because, yeah.
well, it's not to say that that can't be demonstrated within photos. So sometimes I'll make a photo of, say, a plant or a tree, and I'll make comments in the bottom discussing the water levels of, say, the reservoir or the Elbow River. So the observation is made using kind of the tree, but what I'm perhaps doing in the background is making a record of, say, the phenomenon that's happening within the environment. And another example of that would be, say, the changing color of leaves within fall. We're documenting the tree, but within the photograph, we can see that the colors are changing. So
yeah, so you could almost do a tree bat project. Here's a tree, and by the way, there's also no bats around here. And here's another tree, and by the way, there's also no bats here. So your data is accurate in terms of the trees, and you're adding to it, but you could, if you tagged it properly, you could maybe pull that out kind of a sideways way. Interesting.
It's a bit sideways, yeah. And I would only say, like, you should be doing that if you think that there is some value to it. Like if you're just adding these things because you think that somebody one day might check them out. Yeah. I would say it's slim chances.
Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds like the question is kind of a specific thing, like if we're looking and documenting it. And I was going to say too, we've got about 10 minutes left officially. And so if, I know, Matt, I think that you mentioned you're okay staying a little bit later. So if that's still true, I'm okay with that as well. And so we can go over general questions and anything else that pertains to the group in that time. And then if people have specific questions, like a technical issue or just need a hand in trying something or anything like that, to feel free to stay for a little bit. Is that still true, Matt?
Yeah, that's totally good.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So one thing I should say about the iNaturalist app, it is fairly user-friendly, but the Android version currently is much better. And there was kind of this big iNaturalist post the other day. There's an iNaturalist forum that anybody who has an account can visit and check out various topics. There's some very cool things. They said that originally the Android apps, the Apple iOS app was created first. And about a year later, they began to create the Android version. And they have essentially diverged at that time. So that was in about 2010, 2011 when those came online. And ever since, kind of the Android app has just surpassed the iPhone app. The announcement made the other day was that they're redoing the entire app, like coding it. It'll have the same interface more or less as the Android app for Apple beginning after the City Nature Challenge. The reason that they're holding off is because the City Nature Challenge brings in, millions of observations, and it's a pretty crazy time for posting. So they don't want to compromise anything at that time. But anyone using an Apple phone should look forward to the updated version of the app in spring. So what I'm showing you here is what it looks like on my phone using the Android app. And it's as simple as kind of clicking on your name at the top and opening up this side menu. At the bottom, you can make a new observation by clicking this tab. And in this tab, what you do is you can either take a photo within the app, you can make an audio recording, or you can also choose photos that are in your photo gallery or audio clips that are in your audio gallery. When I'm out, I never encourage people to use the app while in the field. The whole thing is like, I definitely think it takes away from your experience in nature when your face is, focused on your phone. So I just take a bunch of photos, and I'll be honest, some are good and some are bad, and that's okay. But what I do is I open this, and I always go to choose image when I get home and I have Wi-Fi. And when I click on that, that will pull up all my recent observations. And by holding down one of these photos, I can then click all of the other ones associated with that one plant. And as I said, like sometimes you'll add multiple photos because you want to show identifiable traits. So in this one, with no leaves in early spring, it's pretty hard to identify a shrub. However, if we zoom in on, say, some of the leaves of maybe last year, or even some of the buds that are happening in spring, we can likely identify this. So you just click those, and that'll bring them right into the app uploader. At the bottom here, you can click which photos you would prefer first. And I should mention that on an Apple phone, you can also like kind of multi-select the photos. On your phone, it's pretty amazing that you can include the geolocation right off the bat, and it includes the date and the time when the photograph was taken. So that's kind of your where and when, and your photos are your what. The most important question is this: what did you see? And when you click on that, a series of suggestions will come up depending on the quality and, of course, that location data for what you're observing. I usually add notes. I do the same often when I'm uploading on the desktop app. And essentially everything is here. You can see that there's also the captive or cultivated box. So if you're, say, documenting your new permaculture garden and you want to make a record of everything that's in your yard or not there. So let's say this is kind of one good thing. So Susan, the hair question is a bit challenging, but let's say you have a yard that is only grass and you want to introduce a whole bunch of native plants, but you can take those observations of your yard, say, over the course of a month, documenting either your lawn or your dandelions or some of those hairs. And then when you've like redesigned your whole garden, you can continue to kind of make your observations, showing the impacts that you may have by planting those native species or something like that. So at the end, all you have to do is just hit the check mark and it's been uploaded. So it's that easy. You can make an observation in a matter of seconds, I would say, on your phone. And kind of the tips for making good observations: take as many photos as needed to get it identified. If you take a photo of a leaf and you have no idea what it is, it's unlikely that somebody else may be able to identify it. There's a chance, but unlikely. Try and have your photos focused if you can. Often that just means on your phone, tapping on the screen where the subject is. You can kind of get a bit more creative. So try and explore those less documented places. For me, those are kind of like, it's an excuse to go urban exploring, checking out alleyways, checking out parks where there's no bird records or plant observations. Often you can find something that's unique to that place, and that includes your backyard. So you can use hand lenses, microscopes, other tools to look for things like, microorganisms or say using what I call like a knock shot, taking a photo with your phone through your binoculars to try and get a bird that's at a distance. Don't forget about the audio recordings for these animals that are difficult to photograph. And in terms of like kind of checking out and exploring stuff, feel free to, favorite somebody else's photo, give them a thumbs up, or just like their post in some way. You can also ask them questions. That's a great way to learn if you're a student or a lifelong learner. For the location accuracy, get it as good as you can. If you're using a GPS and you can sync your camera or your photos directly to that, you can have it down to a 1 meter accuracy. Also, like in your backyard, you might know the exact sidewalk square that you were sitting in when you saw that ant, and you can probably get it right down to that. If you're using an SLR and you can't get GPS or something, you can always take kind of a placeholder photo with your phone. A good way to do that for myself is to take more of a landscape shot, which I describe as like a habitat photo. And if I look back on, say, Google Earth or the map, I can usually somewhat locate where I'm at. For the location visibility, again, like you can obscure it if you feel that your own or the species welfare is compromised, or even your own privacy is of urgency. So don't be concerned about obscuring it, but realize that it does put up a bit of a wall for researchers who may want to source that data. The threatened and endangered species are automatically obscured, and researchers and scientists can still kind of access this through data centers or directly contacting you. So always kind of have fun, never approach or disturb wildlife, and have a respect for nature as you're appreciating yourself. In regards to the City Nature Challenge, so these are kind of the results from last year. We're just at the early planning stages for 2022. Last year was pretty remarkable because we had 27 Canadian cities participate, with 5 in Alberta. That was up from 11 in 2020. And this year we're hoping to achieve 50 cities in Canada to participate. And it could be as many as 700 cities across the world participating this year. And as you can see, it really is a global event with places on every continent, including Antarctica at one point. I think that was in 2017 that they made like 200 observations there. Edmonton participated last year for the first year, and they were recognized as one of the global highlights with this peregrine falcon in the city there, which is pretty cool. And as I said, this event continues to grow, starting in 2016 with only 2 and over 400 in 2021. So this is a great way for us to learn more about urban environments, but also encourage a new generation of iNaturalist users to kind of carry the torch forward. And I have to say that it's almost ridiculous that there's 45,000 species documented in these urban environments across the world. For the City Nature Challenge, it generally only happens within urban environments. So 45,000 species is an outstanding feat. And 52,000 people participating in that. So the dates for this year are going to be April 29th to May 2nd, and we're just in the early stages of planning those. I'm going to put a little challenge out to anyone in Calgary for the rest of this year. as I said, we just passed 90,000 observations. And I would love to see us break 100,000 observations within Calgary before January 1st. What that means is pretty much if there was 100 people, which I would say there's at least that using iNaturalist on a weekly basis, making 1 to 3 observations per day, we can definitely achieve that goal. So I'll just put my contact information up here. And if you have an interest in reaching out to me about any questions regarding iNaturalist or even Calgary's urban environment, please feel free to do so. And with that, we can jump into some more questions that may have come up here.
Fantastic. I'm going to switch the recording off in 1 second, and then we'll go into the backstage hangout with Matt, ask questions section. So while we're still online here, I just wanted to thank you, Matt. Just so everybody knows, our speakers for Wildlife Wednesday are here entirely as volunteers. We don't have a budget for these events. And so when Anne and Marissa reach out to our speakers, it's always let known at the very beginning, like, could you volunteer your time, please? And we're very fortunate for people like Matt who are so generous with your time. And so Matt, we just really want to thank you for this really in-depth, interesting presentation. Congratulations on all of your achievements in the city and bringing attention to urban ecology and to wildlife that we live right next to. I know I'm grateful for that myself. And so well done and thank you. And if anybody wants to use their reactions or anything, just to give you a little applause. Thank you so much for that. Great presentation.
Thanks,
Oh,
Kathleen.
and I'm told, no, don't turn the recording off now. Simone, did you have anything to add? And it's a mystery comment. But yeah, and if you have
Sorry,
questions,
I'm trying to get back to that to unmute, but I think that every question is worthy of being documented, even
sure.
the chat. So unless there's people here who want to ask confidential questions, I would say don't turn the recording off.
Oh, sure. Thank you for that context. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all. And then that is not a problem at all. So yeah, so I don't know, Matt, do you want to dig into the questions there? And that's a good point, Simone, because I think oftentimes the discussions that come after, you get so much interesting information. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I want to go back to LF's question about how their observations are waiting to upload. One thing I would say, there's 2 things you can try. You can kind of try and refresh the screen. And how you do that is by holding down the observation page where it says waiting to upload and dragging it all the way down to kind of the bottom of the phone. That will allow you to try and refresh it. If it doesn't work, you may just have to delete them and try again. You can also try and download the latest version of the app. Perhaps you may not have that, but I also get stuck with that problem occasionally. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a perfect answer for how to get past that except for refreshing the observations or downloading the latest version. So from Carla here, we have, can I go back and upload photos from last year if I think it's something worthwhile to have documented? I would say yes, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, that trip that I was on was from 2011, and I went back through my old photos and thoroughly enjoyed revisiting that trip. And at the same time, found all these photos of plants and animals that I had enjoyed. So I uploaded those, and little did I know I had documented something very important. So I would encourage you to upload historical observations because those are a bit of a rarity. We have lots of museum records that are, say, in these data centers of various species and places. But at the same time, I think there are more people engaging with nature and trying to record it in various ways than ever before. And those historical records provide some context to the growth of this field.
So safe to say, because the person mentioned if it was interesting to them, really to upload any observations, because something that might not seem interesting could potentially be anyway, as long as it's truthful and verifiable, and go ahead and upload it, hey? You never know.
Yeah, and I would say there's a reason you took those photos in the first place. Is it to have them sit in a hard drive on your computer, or is it to, was it interesting enough for you to keep a record for? For myself, like I have gone through as many photos as I can to see how many species I could actually say that I've seen in my life.
Yeah.
I'm only at about 1,600 after uploading 15,000 observations.
Wow.
I think the more you get up there and the harder it is to add new species to your list without going to a new place or something,
Yeah.
it makes you have a greater appreciation for everything, even in the slightest.
It's true. And I have to thank you for last year's City Challenge when COVID first hit. And similar to what you were saying about taking the photo of the landscape, what I was finding is if you lift a rock and take a picture of a worm, and I would zoom in, and suddenly it's like, oh, there are a ton of tiny little things in here too. And it just became so much fun to zoom in to all the little parts on the soil and find a centipede and an ant, and that ant's different from this ant. And there was just so much to see. And I think that being, so that was when we were really close to home, finding like 10 different kinds of mosses and lichens and like right around our block. It was really, really fascinating. And I ended up getting a macro lens because see the tiny things is so much fun. So I think for the folks who really can't go too far but love photography and exploring new things, highly recommend that. But and I think too, you
Yeah,
said if you have
Kathleen,
a
that
photo
brings
with a, oh sorry, go ahead.
Well, that brings up one other good point. So there was one thing when I speak to kind of the research, inherently within all of this type of data through community science, it has inherent biases. And one of the main ones, in terms of iNaturalist, a recent paper was published saying that kind of the more megafauna things have better representation than, say, the smaller and more discrete
Oh,
species. So a really good example of this is like, it's more often that somebody's going to take a photo of, say, a Canada goose or a deer than they will of even that earthworm within their garden. The same
right.
thing for birds in terms of those very difficult and challenging to photograph warblers and wrens and soaring birds. They're harder to document, so there's less observations for those things.
That makes
Those
sense.
biases do still exist within eBird, but they're slightly different
Yeah,
because there is a dedicated kind of community of birders that often are identifying using binoculars, audio cues, where they're a little bit more refined than what we're seeing on iNaturalist. So the difference between these two types of apps is that they're both kind of opportunistic data sources, where iNaturalist is what's considered to be unstructured and eBird is semi-structured. A
right.
structured kind of source of data would be something like a transect or a defined methodology behind the participants that are involved in gathering the data.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And I think, I had a question and then it went boop, gone. It'll come back to me though.
Well, there is one question from Simone here, which I'm happy to touch on. So, do you have
Wow.
ideas about how iNaturalist can inform the city about places that need preservation? How can we use this data for good for city planning?
That's an excellent question, actually.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple approaches in how citizen science data can influence the way that cities are built and how they're managed. The first one is that obviously governments and any agency uh, owned by the public requires they act in the best interests of people. So if there are, say, a dedicated community of people that are going out and making these records, whether it be for eBird, iNaturalist, eButterfly, all of these types of apps, I think it is incredibly empowering, not only for the individuals, but also for the city to recognize these as, say, hot biodiversity hotspots. There is inherited need to act in response to people. And I would hope that the city, not just the city of Calgary, but any government for that matter, would look to these types of data sources for understanding how their people are engaging with nature and why there is an appreciation for a space. At the same time, you know, that really rare thing that you find could be the difference between saving and losing a place. Rare plants, lots of grasses, for example, are incredibly difficult to transplant. If it's a habitat that is, say, known to an endangered species, it could be, say, a nesting site for a bird, it could be a wildlife corridor, then these records can provide the context for why they need to be preserved. And that is not just a ethical approach, but in some cases a legal context where people cannot develop in these areas. So there is, I think, multiple angles to how this can inform leaders across the board, whether it be conservation agencies or government. And I think the growth in the amount of citizen science contributions is unprecedented. And I think that eventually they will just have to engage and include them within ecological assessments as well as decision making.
That is great information. I was going to mention by having the audio added as well is a really neat opportunity because so many birds you can hear but not see. And like you said, they're so difficult to get a picture of. And I find particularly like the gulls that fly so high above your house that you can barely see them, yet you can hear them. And so I was able to practice with the recording for that. Do you have any tips for doing the audio recording? Because I've noticed even doing some observations in iNaturalist, and some are fairly faint, and it's difficult to know what app to use to record it with if you're not able to record it directly with iNaturalist at the time. Do you have any tips for that?
Well, there are lots of instruments that you can add onto your phone. For example, even for taking photos, there are little macro lenses and even telephoto lenses that you can put on your phone now. There's also recording like microphones. I know I've seen them posted in a few different places for documenting bats, where they actually produce a sound file where you can identify the species using that sound file. Some of the easiest ways to just record with your phone, you want to limit noise. So what I would suggest, it's going to be hard to demonstrate this on camera, but putting your elbows like against your core and putting your phone in the direction of the organism. And if you can shield that from wind, say with your back while still pointing it in the direction, that's one way to do it. Another thing is sometimes the presence of yourself is too much. So if you can just say, leave your phone out for some time and make a recording and leave so that you can capture the natural behavior of an organism, then you can, you're more likely to probably record something than if you're present at that exact time. So a phone is not really the ideal way to do any of these audio recordings, but technology is getting a lot better, as can be seen with the Merlin app that has the audio identifier built right into it now. And it looks like Susan has shared the some wildlife acoustic technology here for bats, which is pretty cool.
I'm muted. Can you use that for other than bats too, Susan? Like if you heard a bird, could you use it? Not that I have anything against bats, because you know I don't. Just wondering.
I'll just unmute for a minute.
Yeah, of course.
I believe there's a different microphone that they put on for birds, but you can record birds and you can record frogs and stuff too. And the Song Meter mini unit that I was using this summer, it has both the microphone for bats and then it has the additional one for birds. So the same unit, you can just switch up the microphones on it to do recordings, but that unit's a little bit more expensive. It's like a $700 unit. The one I posted is about 180, so it's a little cheaper.
A little bit easier to digest.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us too.
Yeah, no problem. It's fun.
Susan was going to join us last week, but she had a talk on the same night. So we're like, well, what are your priorities? Like, you can do your own talk. You can come to our talk. We better we'll time it better next time so we can go to each other's. Yes. It's really good to have you here.
We have our own iNaturalist specialist, Jason Headley. I don't know if you know Jason, but yeah, he does a lot of the iNaturalist stuff. Works actually for them, I think.
Yeah, I've never met him personally, but I've definitely seen he's a highly active user.
Highly, yes.
Cool.
Tell him I'm coming for him one day when I get to 20,000 observations.
Yeah, so his most recent thing, and this is kind of interesting, he is growing soapwort plants because he wants to attract yucca moths so he can get pictures of yucca moths so that he can submit them to iNaturalist, because it's like they're all rare components of like a rare ecosystem type. So yeah, and that's what can happen in your backyard. If you start planting native plants, you're going to attract different insects and stuff too. So.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like there are people that go on, expeditions to kind of make these iNaturalist records. And I know that Jason had worked with the BC Parks iNaturalist project, and that's exactly what it is. It's trying to document as much information on iNaturalist about species found in BC parks throughout the province, which is just fascinating. And but it's not to say that you can't do it in your own backyard, not to the same extent, but you can plant native plants, you can make your urban oasis for wildlife. And I guarantee you, if you're keeping an eye out there, every day and every night, you're going to see some interesting things come through. And also, you can also add trail camera photos. So if you capture something in your backyard, then that's something you can add.
So we actually have right now, we've got 15 cameras throughout Calgary. And they're set up for 1 month in the fall and then in the spring to get an idea of how many cats are roaming around Calgary without their owners. And on those cameras, we're also catching, of course, wildlife. Sarah's caught some skunks, which were super cute. If you were here with us last week, you would have seen pictures of the skunks. And of course, different birds and such. And so that's really neat to know that we can do that and also submit some of those images to iNaturalist. And I'm curious if I kind of touched on this last night, so maybe you can explain. I'm always concerned about submitting like too many of one species or something. So what do you suggest if we have like a month worth of photos and we have quite a few magpies going through? Do you just put in the one or two pictures that would represent the number of magpies that you're seeing, or what's an appropriate way to approach that so you're not overdoing it? Or do you want to see how many show up on a day? I'm curious about that.
It's a bit of a personal quest. What is it that you're
Okay.
trying to share with people? Are
Right.
you sharing some behavioral thing about the magpie? Are you trying to share the fact that they're in your backyard? Is it a place where magpies haven't been seen before? Is there just, do you just love them? And I think that that is enough, personally. I think if you can find value in it, then once the data is kind of approached or cleaned out, there's a lot to interpret there. And as I said before, it's not just about kind of the organisms that we find in specific places at times. It's
Yeah.
it's about us. We're the ones using the app. We're the ones documenting those things. And there's just as much value in us caring for things and sharing them with people as there is those things being there.
Wow. Well said. Well said. That's very true. Because think about some of the species that we live around that are persecuted unfairly, like magpies. A lot of people think that they're not native or that they're invasive and that they get upset because they're attacking house sparrows. So they actually have the opposite understanding that house sparrows are actually the invasive ones. And magpies have been here for longer than we have. So it's interesting when you talk about capturing the behaviors. It would be nice to see lots of photos. Like now that I'm learning more about the role of native plants in our ecosystems, like thanks to the great people I've been able to hang around with now, I have a lot more native plants in my yard. And I would just really like to see, like, because we're trying to talk about the positive side of insects being in our community, whereas we're surrounded by people who are blowing away all of their leaves, treating their yards for ants. I've seen new signs go up for new pest control companies who are treating yards. And so there's such a hate on for insects still that I'd really love to see a lot of photos entered, and maybe there are, of birds eating insects, magpies eating things other than their favorite songbird, to show what they actually do day to day. And so I don't know if people are doing that, but I guess that's one thing you had mentioned too, is if you have a photo with more than one species in the photo, you can put that photo in as many times as you need to catch each of the species. Is that right? So if you have a tree and a magpie and it's got a worm in its mouth, you could put it up 3 times, once for the tree, the magpie, and the worm. Is that correct? Or because you can't do more than one species per entry, right?
So these are kind of referred to as 2-fers or 3-fers or 4-fers. And then what that means is that that's how many species you might have in the same photo that are identifiable. So when you make a post, you can duplicate that post and you can share say one for the magpie and one for the beetle that it's eating.
Right.
And there are some ways to kind of link those. I don't really have time to kind of go into all that, but what's important about that is that you can see it from both sides. So one is like you're the predator or the prey. And if you're, say, the researcher looking at it either of those ways, well, you can say these things are predated by, say, magpies, or magpies feed on these types of things. So, I always love getting a good twofer, but it's not always the best because sometimes it doesn't say anything. It's just like a way to get one more post out of it.
Right. Right. I noticed a comment from Susan about the, oh, I've lost it now.
So one thing, I'll just go back to, yeah, so Susan's totally right. Like from multiple photos, phenology can be measured. So I wouldn't say that it needs to be every single day, and like, unless that's something you want to capture. It could be, say, like a larvae going into a chrysalis and then emerging as a butterfly, right? That might be something you want to take a photo of every day just to say like, wow, it's creating this and it's moving through it. And here's the full process. The other thing too, like you might be interested in like why or like what time of year that certain type of street tree or even what time of year any tree for that matter is changing colors or what time it's fruiting. Many,
Yeah.
I don't encourage really using this type of data for foraging, but it's not to say that the potential is not there. If you want to go look for, say, wild strawberries, but you have no idea when to start, you could actually look through photos and figure out when that kind of exists. But
Right.
I think you should learn that from somebody else rather than try and devise a tactic for it. But
Yeah.
but there's lots of things that you can learn through phenology through this type of apps. And one thing here with Simone too, I definitely do agree that kind of the nature of assessments, impact assessments often, or environmental assessments, they don't have the time or the money to simply go out and determine what lives there all year round in a certain place or time. Let's say this is a park that might be under threat. So you're absolutely right, Simone, that iNaturalist and other types of citizen science data can kind of support the general understanding of an area. However, as I said, because these are more unstructured, they do not fulfill all of the requirements for what an impact assessment would normally require. So it may assist with that, but it's likely not going to change their findings if it has to do with, say, soils, climate records, and the general habitat. So, for example, like a forest likely isn't going to change its structure and composition between, say, winter and fall for all that much between, say, 5 or 6, 10 years, whatever. However, some of these rare plants found there, as I said, they could have legal implications for whoever's approaching this project.
Right.
So,
and Susan mentions doing rare, if they do rare plant surveys in the winter, it's kind of handy. Hopefully not. Yeah. I'm curious too about what your thoughts are in terms of urban ecology. In going around downtown, we see a lot of really beautiful landscaping around the buildings. And I mean, it's not always ideal. It may not be native, but some bushes are burying, and there are some that are, they have a lot of, we see a lot of white crown sparrows. There's a couple of buildings where there's always crows and white crown sparrows and things like that during migration. And naturally, the windows are a problem for them still. But aside from that, if they were to treat the windows, they at least have the foliage and the habitat to, rest for a little while and then carry on. But there is always a time, it seems, And it would have been just in the last couple of weeks where suddenly tons of it is just clear cut or completely gone. And rather than just leaving the gardens as is to let them rest for the winter, allow the insects and the leaves to just fall to the ground and survive that way. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or observations or self insights into that method. I think it's just the old school way of gardening that needs to change maybe, but
Yeah, well, that's just kind of, this is very common to all kind of urban centers. We design them for our own pleasing and our own activities. The aesthetic is derived from, in my opinion, outdated practices that are quite colonialistic, and
mhm,
we definitely have a lot of, well, we have a need to think differently and do differently. And I hope in the near future we can see some major changes in how we approach landscaping, particularly within Calgary,
mhm,
and also urban design as a whole. But these are relatively new ideas that have really kind of come to the forefront of society in the past. Some I would say are about 70 years old, about kind of urban ecology. That wasn't even a term at that in the 60s.
right.
And the idea of kind of, realms, we hear that term a lot, whether it be kind of the pedestrian realm or the traffic realm or all of these realms now. And
Mhm.
I love all these new ideas that I'm seeing. I have a lot of optimism towards kind of the future. We're not quite there yet. It can be disappointing. It can be, I know I sometimes suffer from kind of a sense of ecological grief when I visit places that I know once were beautiful and now they
Yeah.
are, paradise paved over.
Yeah.
But I think that nature is resilient and it will be able to rebound if we allow it to. So I am optimistic.
That is fantastic. Do you work with any First Nations communities to collaboratively to help document different native plants and invasive plants that might be occurring on reservation lands and other critical spaces? And
I haven't done any bio blitzes per se,
mhm.
but I just was at this fish rescue on the Bikani Nation down
Oh,
on the Old Man River a couple weeks ago, and it was amazing. I got to camp there, and we were saving fish from the aqueduct or flume
oh,
for the irrigation canal. And we pulled out thousands of fish, and it was not only beautiful, but it was some of the best, indigenous conservation that I've ever seen in terms of its practice and execution. So I
wow.
hope that there is more opportunities, but at this time, no, I haven't done any per se bio blitzes or events like that.
Hmm. Sounds like you'd have interest in that though, if the opportunity came up.
Yeah, well, just kind of going back to kind of the premise of iNaturalist, it's a way that you can share and learn from one another, and whether that be in person, that you get to have those relationships, or even in a virtual world like iNaturalist or something, it's very
Mhm.
important to, find your circles and find value in your relationship that way. So
Yeah. Wow. Oh, I'm really grateful for all of the information that you've shared. I'm grateful for your values too. It was great to hear that you're with Pagani and assisted with the fish rescue. And was there a particular group that was leading that rescue? Or was it a community group? Or just the community itself that were doing that? Did they do that every year?
there's
Or
31 years now that they've done it.
31 years?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Anne and Simone. That was a couple of really good questions, and all of you have made wonderful contributions. Really, really grateful for that. I'm going to just turn off the recording now, and but feel free to stay and say hello.